When you're driven, the need to accomplish a goal is relentless. Hard work and ambition compel you to do whatever's necessary. In my work as a personal injury trial lawyer for 18 years, it's common to meet driven people. Those with drive can have different personalities, careers, or backgrounds, but they possess one common factor. Despite their passions, driven people want to surround and motivate themselves with other driven people. If you want to learn how to overcome obstacles by learning from others, then tune in here. This is the Driven Crowd Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into episode 32 of the Driven Crowd Podcast, fueled by Snellings Law. I'm your host, Scott Snellings. Our guest today is the co-founder and president of eFactor, Kari Willis. Kari ventured into entrepreneurship at the age of 32, following a successful career in wireless and television. Fast forward 11 years, and Kari's firm has established a nationwide presence through their ability in event production, marketing, and brand activation, working with large volume and high-profile clients. Kari is a driven entrepreneur who strives to strike a balance between cutting-edge professional endeavors and creating a family environment for her teams. Kari and her husband, Chris, own eFactor together, and they strive to show their kids that you can create a great life and environment through hard work, confidence, faith, and positivity. Kari, welcome to the Driven Crowd Podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, so I think that's probably the longest introduction I've done because you have all kinds of things that you do. So you're a California girl, right?
I am.
All right. Tell me about where you were born, where you grew up, and how you got to Texas.
Yeah. So born and raised in Southern California. Lived there, went up to UCLA, so stayed in Southern California. And then been in Texas now, 3 years. So made that change during the pandemic.
Oh, yes.
We had talked about it for a while, just for a lot of reasons. Family, where we wanted to raise our children. Being an entrepreneur in California, we don't need to talk about the financial implications that has.
A bit expensive.
Yes, quite expensive. And so as small business owners, that drove us quality of life for our children. And we moved here in October of 2020. And that brought us here. The other good part is with what we do, we are on the road quite a bit. Okay. So now the beauty is I can get anywhere in 2.5 hours.
That's right. Being in the central time zone is incredibly nice if you have to travel to both coasts.
Makes a huge difference. So, And that's less time away from my kids, which was huge, right? Anytime I went to the East Coast, that was 2 days of just travel away from them. And I want to be there for all the things, for all the football games.
That's right. And coming back, you were jet lagged for at least 2 days, I would imagine.
No doubt. No doubt. So so that brought us here and we'll never turn back. We love it. We absolutely love it.
Awesome. All right. So UCLA, you graduate from there with what kind of degree did you have?
Actually, sociology.
Okay.
But as I have learned, right, at the time, you can apply it to so many things. I really wanted to do their communications degree, I guess is what you would call it, but it was very difficult to get into and I didn't get in. And so I was like, well, what's next best for me, which is something that deals with people and understanding there. And sociology has done pretty well for me, I think, at this point. So,
well, I was a psychology major and it was basically because I thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know what I was going to do with it and ended up kind of falling into law school, quite frankly. And I always, kids who are looking at college and, if they ask me for any advice, I'm just like, do something that you're interested in. Right. But whatever it is, make sure that you have to read a lot and that you have to write a lot. Because if you have the ability to think through issues and then write them down in a very clear and precise way, then you're going to go the distance in this world.
And don't we have to teach that to this generation? Oh my gosh, I was watching my daughter's text and they speak in acronyms. I'm like, Lord have mercy. That will not fly in our household. You will learn how to read, write, communicate well, right? Because to your point, it's applicable to so many careers and so many jobs. And it's a life skill they need.
Yeah. Somebody was asking me the other day, okay, if I want to go to law school, what 2 majors would you recommend? And I said, for me, I would say somewhere along the lines of English, history, philosophy. Yeah. Something like that, right? Where you actually have to really develop that capacity to think and to communicate, and you're going to have to write.
Right. Yeah. It's so true. I know. We were having that conversation the other day, and I remember when I was in college, someone said to me, don't worry about the degree as much that you're getting. Do something that you enjoy because you're going to take applicable elements from all of it that you can apply, but also go out and network and talk to people. Go get internships, go do jobs because you'll quickly learn what you don't like And that's a lot easier sometimes to find out what you don't like to get you to what you enjoy, right?
Absolutely. And just as important too.
Oh,
right?
100%.
Hey, if you get into something and you don't like it, hey, that's a blessing because you're learning now, not
right?
a year and a half into a job that you've got.
I just actually had this conversation with an employee who was like, I don't think this is the right job for me. And I was like, great. I'm glad that you figured that out, right? That's a good thing. And that's no harm, no foul to us. Doesn't mean that we don't still believe in you, all the things. It's just not for you. And that's okay, right?
Yeah.
Like that element of being like, that's not for me. That's not failure. That's not, it's, oh, you should feel bad. No, it's just not for you. And that's okay. Move on. Go to what makes you tick. What makes you happy? What does that look like, right?
Absolutely. And that's a huge problem in law. So many lawyers are just trying to find a job out of law school and they end up in something that they'd never even realized, right? Like insurance coverage or construction or real estate and had zero interest in any of it, but that was the only job they could get. And then they're a year or two in and they have this big knowledge base, but they hate it.
Yep.
And that fear of jumping into something new that you think may be interesting or heaven forbid, even switching careers totally to not even practice law is just mind-blowing to even think about that.
That, I would tell you, is the scariest part, I think, for anyone. I know it was scary for me. The scariest moment was when I left my corporate job to start my company. I thought I was going to sink and drown in the ocean. It felt like so overwhelming. And a lot of it's change, right? Even when we uplift and moved our family to Texas, right? All of our family is in California still. And it's that big change and not being afraid of it, right? I mean, it's one of the things we had to talk through with our kids because they were so worried. Well, you're taking us from our family. You're taking us from our friends. And we're like, we know what we're doing. We know this is a good move for us. But change, it's scary for people, right? It's the unknown, right? And getting comfortable with the unknown is not easy.
No, not at all. In fact, we were talking about this on LinkedIn the other day. How do you get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Everybody says, oh, you got to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Well, okay, well, how does that work? If you're uncomfortable, then how can you be comfortable?
Right.
And so when you approach those situations where you're putting yourself out there, right? Because it's a choice.
It
you don't
is a
have
choice,
to be uncomfortable.
100%.
But there's something inside you clearly that drives you to put yourself in those situations. How do you deal with that mentally?
Yeah, it's a good question. I personally, for myself, I love the challenge of the unknown. So what drives me is when I'm uncomfortable, the best thing I can do is get into action. So for me, sitting in the uncomfortable is way worse than once I get into action, I know I'm good. It's getting me over the hump of, okay, I'm going to go do this. But now what's that first step, right? Like what's the word, the paralysis where people...
Paralysis by analysis.
There you go. Thank you. Where people sit in that state, right? Trying to figure out, I'm not that person. Like if you put me in an uncomfortable situation, I immediately sit down and go, what are the parameters? What do I have? What do I know? Okay, what can I do today to make me feel like I'm getting into action and my anxiety and the nerves go away, right? It's kind of like we were talking about earlier about with sports. I performed. I did musical theater as a kid. And once I got on the stage, boom, I was in action. All those fears, those nerves went away. The nerves were worse before. And I've realized now in business, applying that, once I get into action, I'm like, oh, we're good. We're just taking steps. Like, we'll get there. But I think over time, you realize, like, you're not going to get there day one. And you have more patience maybe with yourself.
Right.
When I was younger, it was like, well, I can't do it. I can't do it today. Then, there was this angst. Now I'm like, okay, we'll figure it out. Right? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
But I've learned it's the action for me that takes away the anxiety and the stress and the fear.
Yeah, we were talking about it earlier. Like you said, it's that first hit in a football game or getting punched the first time in a fight. As soon as that happens, your mind goes away from the what ifs, and all of a sudden you're in your sweet spot, right? Yep. You're doing what you've practiced. Same thing for trial with us. There's always nerves and anxiety, but as soon as that jury is seated and you're rocking and rolling, like you don't think about it anymore. It's that action. And I think the more times you do that, like you said, there's an expectation of, okay, this is what it's going to feel like. I'm going to be nervous. I'm going to be tense, but I know that's going to go away immediately, once I hit the playing field or once, we get into the courtroom. And that experience is huge. And unfortunately, we can't pass that on to other people.
Don't you wish sometimes?
I wish I could take it from other people.
And I wish I could give it to my employees, like that are new in the industry that we're in. You wish you could give them that patience, that knowledge, right? But that only comes with time. It does. I mean, I've owned my company 11 years. I was not that way on day one.
No.
Right? Plenty of mistakes I made early on, for sure.
Okay, so you had mentioned jumping out of your corporate job to start this business. So how did you end up in that corporate job, and what did you do? So
I had originally I'd worked in the sports industry and realized it was a job, right? I wanted a career, and it was great. It was fun. It was one of those you got free tickets, and everyone thinks
sports.
It was glamorized to everyone else until you get in it. And you realize it's not as glamorous. It's still a job at the end of the day. Yeah. So really was looking for that next career path, if you will, and then ended up in wireless. At the time, looking at, okay, that had a lot of legs. That ain't going anywhere. And this was 2007, maybe?
Okay.
Don't hold me to that date, something like that, and had an opportunity to go work for an infrastructure provider. Gotcha. So they provide cell phone towers, distributed antenna systems, things like that, and start their marketing department really from scratch. So did that, got my MBA. And after that, it was this, hold on, I need to go do this and do it. Kind of, I know everyone says my way, but I had seen so much in the sports world, then in the wireless space, that I'm like, gosh, I kind of think I see where my passion is and where I can do it a little differently. And also I had worked large corporation and then small corporation and had seen the difference between the two. And I'm like, okay, how do I marry these two? There was good about both, right? And we had my first daughter, and gosh, she was maybe 6 months at the time. And it was really my husband. He was like, enough talking about it.
Oh,
shoved me over the edge and said, do it. And thank goodness he did, right? Because I think I would have sat there forever talking about it and regretted it, because once I started the company, I was like, darn it, why didn't I start this earlier, right? But it's that fear, right? Could I put food on the table still for our family? Yeah. Can I financially make ends meet? And my parents felt the same way. They were looking at us like, are you guys sure? Right? Because they came from a generation of get the corporate job, the benefits, the
pension or the retirement.
Correct.
Yeah,
right?
The safety.
And so going to the unsafe side, right, of, some months are going to be better, some months are going to be worse. And understanding that, it was a scary jump. And so it was, May of 2012 when we did that. And then haven't looked back. I mean, it's been 11 years. It's been a wild ride from as an attorney, lawsuits and everything, which I feel like is like, okay, rite of passage. Now you can own a company once you've gone through that. And it's just been wild. I mean, the pandemic, we're in live events. You can only imagine what that did to our business, but we're still here. Right? It's that grit and that resilience, but that all comes from experience. You go through it. When I got my first lawsuit, I would have thought the world was ending. Yeah. Right? Like, absolutely. What is this? What happens? What did I do wrong? Yep. Yes, exactly.
All right. So you had the thought process of leaving the second corporation, doing your own thing. When did that start? When did that kind of spark to go do your own thing?
Yeah.
First materialize?
I would say a lot of it started to come to fruition when I was getting my MBA. Okay. So I went to Pepperdine and I was in an executive MBA program. And I was very fortunate in the fact that I was of the younger side of my class. So not only did I get to learn from the professors, but the knowledge I got from my cohorts, it was unbelievable, right? It's like us sitting here and we're like, we wish we could give that knowledge to our younger, generation or those coming into your company now. I was surrounded by that. So for me, I felt like I learned so much more just in the environment around people. And once that finished, it was like, hold on. I felt like I had the knowledge now. Because you learn so, like I was in an executive MBA program and it was a business general. So I learned all the elements. Right. And then I was like, okay, but now, right, 11 years later, I was like, you don't need to know all the elements. You need to go hire the people that are smarter in those areas than you.
Yeah.
It's one of those where you're like, if someone had just told me that at the beginning.
I wouldn't have wasted all of this time trying to learn these things that I didn't need to learn. I just hire an expert to do it for me.
Yeah. I feel like now owning a business, it's like you need to understand it all. You need to be able to understand every area of running the business. You don't have to be the expert, right? I lost some time, I think, along the way trying to become an expert in all, or trying to do all the areas on our own, where probably back in the day, if I just put a little money towards it, let someone else be the expert, it would have, sped things up or prohibited some issues at the time.
Yeah, and it's such a rabbit hole too, right? Like, say you're in marketing. Okay, well, there's 18 different things. You could get stuck for 3 years trying to learn SEO and not do anything else.
Correct.
And so I have zero formal business training at all. I've always thought an MBA program would be amazing, but it sounds like to me, the executive MBA is the way to go, especially if you have some experience, because your cohort isn't a bunch of other people who've never done it for real. Your cohort is basically a mastermind group.
Correct.
You get to, I assume they're very willing to share their experiences and their thought processes. And so you have a professor to teach you the book stuff, but then you have the rest of the class to teach you, well, here's how it really works.
Right. No, you remind me of the word. Everyone used to ask me about the MBA program, and I said it was applicable. It was the first time, like, college was great. My undergrad, I had a lot of fun. I cheered, did the whole thing. I had a blast. I didn't find the schooling like as interesting and I realize now, hindsight, when I went to the MBA program, it became applicable. Yeah. Anything I was learning, I could take back to my job or take back to my career. And that was the value for me. So to your point, yes, it's those stories from those you're surrounded by. And our program, I think it was 7 years. You had to have 7 years, at least a minimum in real job experience versus you couldn't just come from your undergrad into that program. You had to go have, business experience. And that was the most valuable piece of it for me, for sure.
Well, and I'm sure for you, had you done it the traditional way of just going straight from undergrad to MBA, it wouldn't have been nearly as applicable to you, and you just wouldn't have absorbed it. I mean, if you were like I was coming out of college, I took a year off and then I went to law school, and I went through law school and I went through college completely differently then than I would today.
No doubt, right? Hindsight. My husband and I always talk about that. Like, if you could go back to college now, imagine. But yeah, to your point, if I had gone straight, I felt like I probably would have just been going to get the grade, right? Yeah. And I think that's a lot of my undergrad. A lot of the time it was like, get that GPA, where in the executive MBA program, I wasn't so worried about my grade. I was more worried about the knowledge. And that's because you could apply it.
Yeah. Who's going to be checking your transcripts?
Yeah.
Right?
Thank goodness.
Do they even give grades in executive MBA, or is it more of a pass-fail?
It's more of a pass-fail.
Yeah. Okay.
For sure.
All right. So you go through this MBA program and you're putting the dots together. You're like, okay, this is kind of the culmination of my work experience, my educational experience. And then did you have any ideas to what you wanted to go jump out and do? Yeah,
I knew from the very beginning, like, I love producing events. So whether it was I've done in the past, like commercial shoots or promotional shoots or executive retreats and things like that, I just knew I love it. Like, I love understanding people and what brings them joy, right? That's the coolest part about what I get to do. And my favorite part is to step back and watch an event happening, because it's like, that's the gratitude I need. I don't need the big round of applause, come on the stage. I need to see what I created in action. Like, there's just such fulfillment for me to watch and go, look at how excited people are. They're loving it. And that's E factor, is that experience factor, right?
Yeah.
And anytime, I always laugh, like, I use the Starbucks analogy because everyone can relate to it. Starbucks isn't the best coffee, let's be honest, at least in my opinion.
I would agree with that.
Right? But the experience they give you in their coffee shop, it's consistent. You know what you're going to get, and you go for the experience. That's E factor, is we always want to look at what's that experience, whether it's a brand activation, whether it's an event, from the invite to the way you exit. What does that feel like for people? And that's the fun part for me, is watching people smile and enjoy something that you created.
And so fun part is, having the clients, figuring out what they want, designing this experience.
Yes.
but then it all has to come together.
Yes.
And that is not an unstressful job that you've created for yourself, right? You have these massive expectations. You've gotten in, you've tapped into their inner soul, and now you actually have to do the thing.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with the stress that comes with that? I just picture like the future mother-in-law, who's all about the wedding and, everything has to be absolutely perfect. And we all know who I'm talking about, right?
Yes.
Or the character.
Yes, the character. Event planning is not for the faint of heart. To your point, people oftentimes, I get a lot of younger generation coming out and being like, I want to be in event planning. And when you interview them, right, you kind of have to take them out of the glory days, like the glorified what event planning is, to what it looks like really behind the scenes, right? Mm-hmm. It's not. You have to love it to do it. And you also have to be someone who can make quick decisions on the fly. And a lot of the time, it's based off of the knowledge you have at that split second. It's not going up to your terms in your line of work, go find all the facts. We don't get time.
Yeah.
And there's oftentimes you're having to make split second decisions, one right after the other. And you're like, shoot, that one I made 2 minutes ago is affecting this one. But you got to roll with it, right? And it's contingency planning. It's always knowing something's going to go wrong and, okay, well, we'll just solve it, right? I always tell my employees, it's solutions, not problems, right? We are not problem people. We are the solution for our clients. And that's the biggest one. The stress of it, I told you I'm an adrenaline junkie. I love it. Like the stress of it drives me. And I love those moments, right? I like when there's chaos and I can solve it. I like when I get a client who's just all over the place and I'm like, oh, I'll streamline this and we'll make this great for you. There's something for me that is fulfilling. And if that's not you or in you, it can be a very stressful industry, I guess you could say, right? Where people really struggle in it because if no, this is how it's supposed to go and it can't deviate from the plan, event planning is not for you because everything deviates. Even after you've done 6 months of preparation and you get on site, something's going to happen, right? But it's fun for me. It's not fun for everybody, which is also why we have a business because some people don't want to do it. They don't like the stress of it. They want to hand that off to someone else.
And so how do you handle that? And I guess, let me ask it this way, from your first year doing this until today, how have you changed in terms of when someone comes up to you and says, Kari, we can't do X, we have to do Y, and Y looks like an impossibility to you. And all of a sudden you get the pit in the stomach. How do you deal with that differently today than you did 12 years ago?
Well, a lot has changed in that time for sure. I think the biggest thing is I've seen so much that honestly, in those moments, I don't get that pit in my stomach anymore. I actually go, ooh, this is where we strive. This is where we're at our best, right? Because now I can show my client, in my opinion, how good we are in those moments. That really can separate us from other competitors. So for me, that's exciting. Like, come to me. I will tell you, that's where in event planning, you always got to have someone who's looking big picture at the event. Right? So how we function is everyone kind of owns their area of the event. Okay. And I or another event producer, right, sees the big picture. Because if not, you can't make those split second decisions because you're not seeing, you're too, face down in one area, in the weeds. Exactly. Yeah. So I think for me, it doesn't overwhelm me anymore. I'm prepared for it. Like I go in mentally ready for it. And I've seen so much over those years that it's like, okay, let's roll. I don't know. I stay very even keeled in those situations.
And so, all right, let's go back to you graduated MBA and you knew that you wanted to do event planning. Yep. You're going back and forth. Your husband is the one for you who kind of pushed you over the edge. He probably got tired of hearing you talk about it.
Probably. Right? It's like enough already.
Yeah. But that's such a common problem. Or I don't want to say problem. It's a common theme.
Yeah.
Somebody has a great idea. They think they would be really good at it. They have the ability to do it, but they sit there in that analysis pattern. And then all of a sudden, they're 55 and have been at this company for 35 years and it's, getting on to retirement time. And so then they just never do it.
Yep.
What was it that I mean, obviously your husband, but what was it that kept that thought in your head and making it more real and real as opposed to just this kind of daydream that you had as you were sitting at a boring office job?
So kind of goes back to my childhood. Funny you should bring this up. So for me, when I was 16, right, I feel like people talk to you about dreams and goals, right? So I had a lot of goals, but my dream was always to perform on Broadway. And I was 15, 16, and I got the opportunity to perform on Broadway.
Oh, wow.
Amazing, right? Amazing. Moved from California to New York City, the whole thing. And that one piece of my life changed the projection for the rest of my life. In that I was like, there was even this time after it that I'm like, oh, I don't have a dream. I fulfilled my dream. Like it was almost like a bizarre moment to be like, everyone's got a dream. Like,
existential crisis.
I did. I was like, wait a minute. But then as I got older, I was like, so if I can capture that dream, right? And that click of like, oh, for so long, I think dreams seem out of reach for people. And for me, it was that way. And then when that happened, I'm like, hold on, what's that next dream? What's that? Because I think I can do this now. And I think I want to give that to my kids because not necessarily do we always believe that that's achievable. Almost sometimes we think that dream is like so far out of reach because it's out there where my goals are right here and I can go get my goals.
Right.
And so for me, it was that. Like I leaned on that feeling and going, wait a minute, you've done this before. This is just a different dream to go after.
And so it's so funny because I was talking with this about someone else a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't invent this term, but somebody I heard use it or I saw use it, and it's a mental asset. And so kind of what it means to me is when you're able to go, out of your comfort zone, you work really, really hard for something and you get there. And it can be a physical goal, like running a race. It can be a career goal. It can be a relationship goal, whatever. Then you've created this asset that you can kind of tuck back in your mind,
right?
And then go back to whenever you're in the next hard situation, right? So if you've run a half marathon, right? Okay, for me that was really, really hard. I had to train for a while for that.
Me too. And I only did one, and I'll never do another.
Yeah, right. And so now on longer runs, when it gets like, gosh, I'm done. It's like, hold on now, you've already run 13. You're only at mile 7. Like you got this. And so you can kind of channel that effort. And so for you, it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing when you accomplish your big audacious goal, big hairy audacious goal early on in life, and you redeveloped even more and larger goals.
When I remind myself that now, right?
Yeah.
So I remember when we started eFactor, it was, we just got to get to 10 years because I had all the stats in front of me of how many women at the time, back in 2012, started a company and had made it to 10 years. That statistic was so small when I started. I was like, that's the goal, the 10-year goal. And when we hit it, gosh, a year or so ago, I mean, I just bawled my eyes out of my closet because I'm like, oh my gosh, like we did it. But then it's that same thing I had after that Broadway. Okay, now what's the next one? What is that next big step? Because it came. But to your point, it's that mental, again, goes back to probably what we talked about at the beginning, is that experience factor of it sitting back there and what you can pull on, what I pull on at events, right? My team's always like, we don't know what's going on there. We don't know all the knowledge you have in there on day of that. I know those are the right decisions, but it's part of it, right? Is that, to your point, when you've been through it, it's tucked back there and you can rely back on that mental, like, I remember when I was there, what did I do? You know?
Or what should I have done? Because what I did screwed up, right?
Many of those. That could be a whole podcast in itself. Yeah. What mistakes did you make along the way?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. You and I could both fill up a couple of days, I'm sure. And so I bet, achieving that 10-year goal was magnified in that you had just gone through COVID in a live event industry. So when COVID first happened, at what point did you realize, oh my gosh, this is real and we have to transition. We got to figure out some way to keep this thing alive because it ain't going to be big events.
When I will tell you, for us, it was beyond fast. Probably the biggest low I've ever had. build a business for 8 years. You can imagine blood, sweat, and tears, times when you couldn't pay bills and had employees and the whole thing. And no joke, within 2 weeks of the shutdown, 90% of our business was gone. Awful. It was awful. It was to the point where I didn't want to wake up in the morning because I'm like, either my phone's going to ring or my email, I'm going to email. And every time someone called, it was just like that cringe in your spine. Like, I don't want to take this call because you're just losing business. And it wasn't and our clients were amazing. It wasn't because of us. It wasn't because of our service, which was even harder sometimes to swallow. You sit there and you kick yourself like, why didn't I see this coming? And it's like, no one saw it coming. We couldn't have prepared for it. No, never in our wildest dreams did we have a plan that in case the live event industry couldn't happen, right? And it was awful. I mean, believe me, there was days I bottle of wine in the closet, keep the kids away from me, let me get the cry out, let me pour me. But to your point of turning back to those memories, my husband and I looked at each other and it was like, we've got to go back to when, 8 years ago, we had nothing. Okay, technically right now, we literally have nothing. And it was relationships. And my husband always says our business is built on ROR, return on relationships.
Love it.
There was relationships we didn't know were going to bless us during that time. And we literally just started picking up the phone. Here's our situation. If you got anything, we will take it, right? We talked to an AV company and partnered up with them to try and turn as many of our events into virtual events.
Oh, yeah.
We pivoted very fast, sold it before we even knew how to do it. Like, we'll figure
Hey, we're good at stress, so we'll just go ahead and loft that on here.
Absolutely, we got this for you. Oh, gosh. How are we going to broadcast
What does AV stand for again?
There was those moments, literally, and literally our clients were, well, don't we have to have someone host this? I'll be your host. How much it costs? I'm free. Just pay my company to produce. And I started hosting some of the events for our clients. And then someone said, we got into this gifting side of it.
Okay.
So what we found out is a lot of companies that couldn't do their live events were like, how do we still engage either with our employees or with our clients? And we started getting into the gifting business. And it started with 35 gifts on the pool table at my home because couldn't go to the office. And we started shipping out of our house to our last one of that year was 9,000 gifts. So it was like this
more than fits the pool table.
Yeah, way bigger. Literally, it was the garage. And my neighbors were like, what kind of business are you running over there?
What are you selling out of your garage, Kari?
Right? Very odd. But it was just one of those where I was reminded, and so was my husband, make those relationships even when you don't need them, right? We learned that with our business. Get the line of credit before you need it for your business, all those things before you need it. And they came back to bless us during that time, but you can't be afraid to start over.
Yeah.
Right? Part of it was that embarrassment. Oh my gosh, we're 8 years in, and now here I am having to just start like it was day one. But if you're willing to, the work is there. You just got to rely back and never be too, I guess, the ego. Let the ego go. That you'll go back and just say, hey, here's the situation we were in. And it was a very humbling experience.
And humility is so huge for entrepreneurs, right? As soon as you get that big sale or you start rolling, I've seen many a business owner all of a sudden end up, head over heels, and the ego just got too big and took them down. Yep.
Well, it's, as we both know, it's a roller coaster ride.
Oh, for sure.
And that happens in a day, let alone in a year, right? There's days I'm like, that was best call. Oh my gosh, we got this new client, great. And then an hour later, this client's falling apart, or this employee. It's like, it's not for the faint of heart, because it is like this. People say it's a joke, it's a roller coaster. Oh no, reality is that's how it feels on some days. Like, you got to kind of stay here, because if you go with it, it's not for the faint of heart.
Absolutely. And I love that term, return on relationships. We, for our whole team, we always talk about, hey, it's all about relationships. It's all about relationships. And I think that is something, and I've talked about this on other people's podcasts, that is just woefully missing in our education system is, one, stressing the importance of your network
Mm-hmm.
and of building relationships. And then two, like encouraging people on how to do it, right? Just because you're an introvert and you don't want to go to these big functions and just go try to meet people, that doesn't mean that you can't network.
Correct.
Anyone and everyone is a networker. You just got to know, one, what a linchpin it is for your business, as you are exhibit A, right?
Yep.
Had you not had your relationships,
right.
Who knows what you'd be doing right now?
Oh, that's my whole business. I'll be honest. We are very fortunate. In 11 years, we have not done marketing or put money towards marketing for the firm because we're a belief that every relationship should turn into another business opportunity. So our big thing is, where's our best is at an event. Someone seeing us in action.
Yeah.
That's better than any video. Any pictures can tell them. They can see our team in action. From there, try and get a lead from every event we do, right? And I wish you're right that this, when we talk about take this knowledge and pass it on, is how important the relationships are. And everyone's important, not just the ones right now that can make you money right now. It's the ones that you don't know. And all of them are important, right? Treating them all the same. I don't care when we're at events, I don't care what your title is. If you're the lowest paid or the highest paid in the room, everyone should be treated the same, and everyone's important, especially for what we do, because it makes the whole event run smooth. From the person who's picking up the trash to keep it nice and clean to the executive that's paying your company to put on the event, right? Both are just as important. And both are relationships. You never know where someone's going to go. And what do they remember? How you made them feel.
Yeah, absolutely.
There is some basics that I think at time we forget in business, and we get so sidetracked and focused on the execution and money and this. And I'm a big believer, and my husband bigger than me. It's like relationships. They'll pay you down the road. But stay focused on the relationship, the money, the business, all that'll come in time. And back to what you were saying earlier about when you started versus now, I wish I understood that when I started my business.
Right.
I feel like at times you took clients that probably weren't the right fit for the firm. You took just because you needed the money instead of being patient, right? There's just things, and that comes with time, but that's the core of our business. And I hope, and I would think that should be the core, no matter what industry you're in.
Right.
It's people.
And with developing those relationships, we're big proponents of, hey, look, provide value. Mm-hmm. Don't go into a relationship looking for immediate value for yourself, right? Because a lot of relationships that you have, they're never going to pay off in terms of business, but that doesn't mean they're not valuable relationships.
Correct.
Right. And as soon as you provide value to someone, you've made their life better.
Yep.
And I think if we approach developing relationships like that, then one, it's so much easier, right? You go to a big networking event, you're an introvert, and you see some guy standing in the corner, like just on his phone, go talk to him.
Right.
It's just like talking to any new person that you meet, and they're dying for someone to come talk to them.
Yeah.
Just by making that move, you've added value to their life. And you've made them comfortable.
There's the value, right? There's the return. We talk about this a lot with our employees, because even with our clients, it's how do you make their life better? I don't care what our scope of work says. Do you know that they love this sports team, this charity? Think ahead for them, right? Give them something before you'll ever ask for it in return. We try and pass this on to our kids as well, right? That's the value. And if you're someone who constantly provides value for other people, it'll come back to you tenfold. But don't go looking for it. Just look where you can provide value. Constantly looking and going about business that way is going to be way more valuable for yourself and for those people. And that's how you make them feel, right?
Absolutely.
And that's what people remember. They don't remember what chicken dish they ate at an event, right? They remember how they felt at an event. They remember the relationship they had with you. That's the value.
Absolutely. And, I'm certainly not meaning to suggest that don't be strategic in what events you go to or the people that you go to meet.
Yep.
But at the same time, you can provide value to anyone very easily, just very, very easily. All right. So tell us about EForce. Obviously, we do big events.
E-Factor.
I'm sorry. E-Factor. Well, you're a force, right?
Well,
you're a force to be reckoned with.
Maybe I should have called it EForce. No, just kidding.
Or the E can stand for multiple things now, right? Experience,
right?
emotion,
All of it.
All of it. So tell us about that.
So eFactor, it was when I was going through this process of, I'm going to start it before my husband said, and pushed me off the cliff and said, go. I kept remembering, like, someone had told me, and I don't remember, unfortunately, who it was along my career path, that if you have to tell people you're a leader, probably not a leader. Right? Show them. Right? And then this word experience stuck with me. And it's become actually pretty popular since I started the company, that experiential marketing, experiential activations, all that. But I realized that was it, but I didn't want to call it experience. So that's where we went with eFactor, because it's that factor, but I'm going to show it to you instead of tell you about it.
Yeah.
It was really, that's where we started. And that was at the core of it. And it grew from there, for sure. I started in the wedding planning was one of them. I got into it as quickly as I got out of it.
You had the mother-in-law experience.
Not mine.
I'm certainly not suggesting mine is that way either.
Me neither. No, I got a jackpot there on mother-in-law. She's amazing. But I saw others, and it was personal money is involved in weddings. And I was like, no. I felt like a psychologist, and I did not want to be one, and a therapist and an event planner. And I was like, I'm done. So we moved on from there. But that's where it went. And it went from there as to, where are those experiences? Where is that joy that we can bring people? And that goes back to connecting to people. Mm-hmm. And that's where we've tried to stay to this day, is how do we keep connecting people? And after the pandemic, even more so, right? We focus even heavier on in-person, because that you get a good connection in person with people. Virtual was very good to us. I'm not going to argue it, but there was this hunger back again for that experience in person that you just can't duplicate on camera with people, or saying that's an event, right? It's different. For webinars, the podcasts, all this, it's great, but it doesn't give you the same thing that an in-person connection with someone gives you.
Absolutely. We are all social.
Yes.
No matter how much people
even
may hate it, even introverts, but we're social beings. And it's so hard to even, virtual networking events. Mm-hmm. There's not the energy there that you have in a room, and you can't get that personal eye contact, and you can't see the full mannerisms of people. And there's just that social aspect, I'm a sociology major, that is missing. And you just cannot possibly create the kind of connection that you can in person.
And people are hungry for it.
Yeah.
Like, after we felt that. And people are, the fun part for us is people have moved away from having to be so rigid and so like corporate robots to like, they want to go have fun at these events. Yeah. They want to let their guard down. We were talking about video, right? Why is video so hot right now? Because it doesn't have to be overproduced anymore. Keep it real.
Absolutely.
It's okay. Fumble over your words like we've done here, or just be you. And you don't have to turn the camera on and be like, I am perfect. You can go on and just, hey, this is the reality of it, right?
Yeah.
And even connecting on social media with my network, it's funny to watch it, because when I give the behind the scenes, or I do the funny stuff that's just like me and my sweats, I get way more interaction and because people are like, oh, I can relate to that, as opposed to the hair done, the makeup done. Like, this is how I run my business. It's not like that. It's not pretty behind the scenes.
Yeah, like this is chaos. Plain and simple.
It is.
Awesome. All right, well, we're out of time, but
well, darn.
I know, it goes by so quick, doesn't it?
It
does. So tell me this, favorite books? Can be business, can be fiction.
I've got a lot of good ones. Tipping Point.
Yeah, Malcolm Gladwell.
Yes.
Great
one of my favorites by far. I think I've read it a couple times.
His are always good because they're short.
They're short, but they're impactful.
Yeah, he does not waste words.
No, he does not. He does not. So that would probably be my number one recommendation.
Okay. What's second and third?
Oh, goodness. The one, I'm reading one right now by Ed Milet.
Okay.
Really good one. And why the name of it is... And why I can't even think of the name now. Well, I'll get that back to you. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Or is that what it is? Or that's the last way? I'm butchering all the names. 7 Habits of Highly... Yeah, that's what it is.
Say 7 Habits and everybody knows exactly what you're talking about.
They know what they're talking about. Yeah, that one sits on my bookshelf, and I turn to that quite a bit.
Awesome.
Quite a bit. But I try to read more so now than I did before. I get a lot out of it. I used to be like, no, I don't have time. I just need to be productive. But I'm seeing so much value in just other people's insights and how can I apply it. But
Yeah, absolutely.
audiobooks
Awesome.
are good too.
Well, Kari, thank you so much for joining us on The Driven Crowd today. And thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next time on The Driven Crowd Podcast.